So good afternoon to all. We are here with Luis and Tom that will share their knowledge and experience with us. So the major topic for today is the importance of the gym work for performance and injury prevention in football. So the first question is like football changed over the last few years in terms of physical performance, and how can we adapt to it? How can physical trainers, coaches, and athletes adapt to this development or evolution of the game? The first question is for Luis, and then Tom can also speak about it.
Sure. Okay. So, hi to all. I'm very excited to be here. So, thank you for the invitation. Answering to your question, so football in the last few years has improved, has changed, and we can see that most of the change, apart from the technical and tactical side, is also related to physical performance. So, for example, we have several studies that shows us that, for example, sprint is we have greater number of sprints today in comparison with some years ago. For example, in this study done in Germany in the Bundesliga, they concluded that the largest amount of decisive situations or goal scoring opportunities in their league was preceded by a straight sprint. We have other things that shows us, for example, in the English Premier League, that over the last few years, high intensity running and sprinting distance has increased by 30 to 35%. So the game is more intense physically. And we have, for example, analysis in the Champions League and Europa League matches that the average sprint distance covered is around 200 meters, 300 meters. So all of this can show to us that physical performance is important in football. So not only the players are running more and faster, but these kind of situations result in key opportunities or goal scoring opportunities in matches.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah. I think Lewis summed it up very well there with all the research that's out there. We've obviously got to use the research, address the research, and then apply it within the practical environment. So it's he's hit the nail on the head with some of those papers there. I think, like Lewis has said, it's obvious that the game has changed and developed and ultimately got more intense and more increased in the kind of intensity and physical nature of the game. And what that means is that we've got to, as practitioners, we've got to make sure that we keep up with what's happening. So our training then has to adapt, whether that's out on the pitch, in the gym, the way that the players are training, how they're training, the modalities that we're using is obviously of more importance now than it was, when some of those studies were first starting in 2006, 2007. So they're great examples of how the game has improved. We all know that it's got more intense, and whether that's the players that are being involved in the games and being used by the teams having better physical attributes and being able to sprint more, but it's also got to be the training and the kind of applications that we're rolling out in clubs.
Okay, so how can we, with these strength and power sessions, how can we improve the performance of the players, Tom?
Yeah, I think we all know that strength and developing good strength qualities with players of all different positions has got benefits. So in terms of robustness out on the pitch, so that we know that the kind of strength and the the robustness that it brings about. Also helps with this kind of injury prevention, that side of things. We know that with sprinting and jumping, changes of direction, that maximal strength and power are so important as well. So developing those attributes in the gym goes a long way when it comes out onto the pitch, as long as it's being done in the right way and periodized at the right time in the week. It doesn't then affect their football performance, and it's being able to complement what they're then doing out on the pitch.
Yeah. Luis? How do you see this?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Tom, and we need to see strength and power or gym sessions, weight room sessions, as a complement to everything the athletes do on their football training, right? So they are football athletes. They are not weightlifters. However, strength and power training, as well as strength conditioning. So when we talk about strength and power, we are not talking only about the weight room. We can do some other kind of stuff that are related with physical capacities. For example, the sprints outside on the field. But we need to realize that the strength conditioning needs to be integrated with everything that the athlete does inside the pitch and outside. So. And I think this kind of intervention, strength conditioning, it adds additional things that the players do not achieve during their technical or tactical training. So, for example, there are, and today with technology is very easy. So I think the technology can give us new insights about the game. So, for example, a few years ago, when GPS was not a huge topic in football, people tended to. It was more related to opinions of what people see, but we didn't have numbers to quantify things. But today, with GPS, for example, we can see that what players do inside their technical and tactical training is not enough in comparison with what they experience in matches. For example, in this paper, these researchers, they concluded that, so they tried to see the maximum speed achieved in several small-sided games in football training, and they realized that when we combine all the kinds of games, for example, 5 versus 5 or even full pitch, box to box, we realized that players only achieve 82% of their maximal sprint in matches. And so we are 20%, we are lacking 20% of sprinting during their training. So it's very important to have this complement of strength conditioning in order to try to match the demands of the game.
I think sorry, Mario, just adding to that as well, I think we're talking about strength kind of generally and quite kind of generalized at the moment. I think when you start to narrow it down and look at some of the specifics in terms of hamstring strength, and the importance of that, it's obviously a widely discussed topic with eccentric strength or whether it's isometric, lots of different opinions that are out there. And I think one of the key things is, if we're talking about how can strength and gym sessions improve performance, you just look at some of the literature that's out there and the applications of eccentric hamstring strength. We're fairly big advocates on eccentric hamstring strength with the Nordics and variations of the Nordic exercise. And we've seen some great stuff in terms of obviously then reducing the occurrence of injuries, especially within that area, within that muscle group. And we found that through kind of several different interventions and developments that we've done, the hamstring strength stimulus and kind of focus on that with our guys has been really good. So I think that's just another way that narrowing down on specific strength, not just general strength, is a really key way.
Yeah, sorry, Mário, and people, for example, they tended to look at strength more as, especially people who are not from the field of strength conditioning. They think their strength training is more like hypertrophy based, so it's more to make the players bigger. But in fact, the main goal, so the number one goal of our intervention is, apart from enhancing performance, is also to try to reduce or increase robustness, reducing injuries. So, and in terms of performance, there is a lot of scientific, but also field experience that when players are stronger, they are also faster, they jump higher. So this kind of work is not like what we believe or what we like to do. Is something that should really be part of the game. Not the most important part of the game, but a very important and a missing part on this game, since, as we saw before, the game is more physical. So the demands are improving in terms of physical capacities.
Yeah, and the next question is about the injury prevention. So I think this is the major topic that I think coaches are really awareness of this kind of strength and conditioning work. I think, I don't know if you agree with me, that injury prevention is the major topic for athletes and coaches, more than they see this kind of work more for injury prevention than for performance improvements. I don't know if you feel the same. And when we know that these muscle injuries, like Tom talked before, are increasing, how can this kind of work, gym work or strength and conditioning work, can help athletes to be more protected from these injuries, and how can we show coaches that this can reduce the injuries of the players, and he will have more players available for the game?
Yeah, I think you're totally right in terms of that is probably the most important thing. And for a manager to have as many players available as he can is the underlying reason why we do our job, basically. That's why we're here. We have to keep them as fit and as healthy going into each game as we possibly can. And we try and reduce the occurrence of injuries or the risk of injuries. And that's kind of the way that you need to then sell what you're doing with the players. You know, we're ultimately salesmen in the workplace. We have to try and sell what it is and why we're doing it to the players, but then also to the manager as well. So personally, I've been lucky. I've worked at this club for a long time. I've seen different managers, but they're all equally as interested in the strength side of things and making sure that they have the players available for as long as a season or the whole season as much as possible. So they've allowed us to do our strength sessions and carry out what we're wanting to do. We haven't really had to sell or explain the reasons and the need for doing things. It's all been quite good with the culture that we've got with the guys here, with the players and the staff, as well as the managers that have come in and overseen things. So that is the main area in terms of trying to engage the players and gain their kind of buy-in and make sure that they're integrated into the training regime of what we do in the gym and how it's going to affect them going outside. So keeping them fit and healthy and robust. But then also touching on the performance elements of, okay, well, this is what, we know from the research that strength underpins speed and, being powerful on the pitch and being quick on the pitch is so important for, like Lewis says, for significant moments, whether that's going forward or going back the other way. So we touch on that, but ultimately, I'd say that the injury prevention is the main side of it. So if we can show players and prove to players that doing this work in the gym can help them on the pitch and keep them available, that's ultimately where they, that's where they make their money and they can improve their lifestyle and their careers, their futures, because they're on the pitch. They're able to score goals. They're able to do their jobs.
Luis?
Yeah, absolutely. Tom did a great job summarizing things up, and he ended up saying improving lifestyle. And personally, I'm a true believer that strength and power training is crucial for all kinds of athletes, so football players are included. But as I said in the beginning, I truly believe that the clubs who are more successful in terms, for example, in injury rates, are the clubs who are more organized. So strength and power is integrated, seamlessly integrated into a system. So it's not strength and power by itself that is going to prevent injuries. And this applies to any other kind of intervention. I believe that it's not solely a single intervention that is going to have massive results. It's more like how to integrate all the pieces in the puzzle together. And I think a lot of times this is what is missing. People are doing probably everything right sometimes, but things are not integrated or they don't relate to each other, and there is interference between the field and the gym. And probably this is why we see, for example, hamstring injuries are increasing their incidence over the last few years. Because today we have all the technology, we have all the resources, probably better resources than some years ago, but we still see more injuries. And I truly believe that the gym is one of the biggest missing pieces of the game. I truly believe that this is something that is still missing a lot. But I truly believe that it's this kind of how to integrate everything together that will make ultimately the difference.
Yeah, again, can't echo that or reiterate that much more. It's just one piece of a very big puzzle, and it's the whole the whole integration of it and the communication, the collaboration between different departments within a multidisciplinary team that will ultimately lead to success, amongst many other things.
Yeah, and this is something that we should always stress from the beginning, because even if a player works very well in the gym, if he's very strong and powerful, for example, if he doesn't have a sound and logical load management, or if recovery is not maximized, if his lifestyle is not appropriate, of course things are going to happen. Injuries are going to occur. So even to protect ourselves as strength conditioning coaches or as practitioners, is very important for us to stress that strength and power training is very important for athletes, but when it needs to be integrated in the entire system.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah.
Do you feel that selling this kind of work to manager and athletes, it's easier now, or it hasn't changed much?
I think maybe selling was a bit of a funny term. Maybe educating might be the better term. But I mean, I've like I say, worked here for 6-7 years, and the kind of different crops of players that we've had, a lot of them know about strength and power training and the kind of influence it has on their performance and their injury prevention. But as time's gone on, we've obviously improved as a club, and we've built up our status, and we've brought in bigger players which have come from, here, there, everywhere. We have a different kind of demographic now to what we had when I first started 6-7 years ago. So the players that are coming in now poses a little bit of a different, style of approach for us, because they're coming from different backgrounds. They have a completely different training history to what a lot of our players that have been here for a long time, or the English players that maybe understand and have been educated and been brought up in a certain way. I know, speaking to you guys in particular, that some clubs in Europe do things a lot differently to us, and I've seen things firsthand. I've seen things online, and there's a lot of variation in how people carry out and administer strength and power training. So I must say that when we're now trying to talk to players that are coming from clubs who have done things completely different, and they've maybe been at that club for their whole career, they've been educated in a certain way or a certain style of strength and power training, we have to kind of approach them in a bit of a different way, educate them, and try and, obviously cross the language barrier sometimes, and it's difficult. But if we can go to them, see what their kind of values and their opinion on strength training is and how they've trained in the past, try and approach them in that way, understand where they've come from, that they're potentially not the best technically in the gym and they've done different things, or they're not used to lifting heavy loads and pushing out big force. We have to kind of take that into consideration and then adapt their training appropriately, give them as many options as we can with different pieces of kit, and then try and kind of over time introduce them to some of the work that we're doing and our kind of philosophy in terms of what we do in the gym, and then hopefully get some good improvements alongside what we're trying to look at and focus on. So I think it has changed over time, but more so with the players that we've been bringing in than players being more knowledgeable or less knowledgeable for that matter. I think it's been more the kind of crop of players that we've been bringing in and recruiting.
Yeah, I totally agree with Tom. And I think today the biggest change we see comes from the players themselves. So today we see, starting in the academy, we see a lot of kids, for example, having already exposure to strength and conditioning or physical training. And even parents, they pay to their kids have training. And this is starting to change in football. So I truly believe that the first change is starting in the players. After, I think that the coaches are also changing a little bit their mindset. However, they are more, like you said before, Mario, coaches are more into the injury prevention side. I think almost every coach today is aware that injury prevention is very important to team performance in the season. However, I think that there's still a lot of controversy, a lot of debate into what kind of training or what kind of interventions, in fact, reduce injury risk. And as Tom said, we see a lot of clubs doing different things, a lot of athletes who, despite they are already top athletes, but in terms of physical capacities, they are not very experienced, or in terms of strength and conditioning. So this makes things a little bit harder to manage, especially when we talk about the academy. I think overall it's easier because all the players we have differences, but every player is developing. Still, when we talk about 25, 26, 27-year-old athletes who make a lot of, who make very good salaries playing football, and they come from different backgrounds, that makes things a little bit harder. But as Tom said, is try to approach them in different ways. Don't try to push them so don't try to force them abruptly. So step by step, trying to integrate them into what that particular team is doing. And I think that's the right way to, like you said, to sell our product. Is not try to force them into it. It's like trying to build some buy-in slowly, and eventually the results, especially the athletes, they will feel the difference when they do this kind of work.
Sure. And one thing, just to add on that, Mario, one of the things that we have always done and been really kind of proud of is that we individualize everything. So we don't run any big group sessions. We don't get 25 players in the gym and they all do the same stuff. They all lift the same exercises. They're not doing all the same reps and things like that. We individualize things a lot here, and we try and bring down the player coach ratio. So we go in there with just 1-on-1 or 1-on-3 and try and have a bit more time with them. They obviously enjoy the love that they get when they have one coach to 3 of them or 2 of them. You get time with them. You get to speak through different things with them, talk through different technical things. And like I said, offer as many different options as we can. So we're lucky to have a great facility here where we have a range of different modalities of getting those strength stimuluses in. So I think it's been really key to cross that bridge, that difficult bridge of people that come in and maybe don't have that much of a kind of training history or a gym background, and be able to approach them in different ways, and ultimately remove kind of any technical element from what they're doing. If we're starting to get them to lift big loads in a real technical way, it's putting them at risk. That's not what we want to do. And I think hopefully this could work, but bear with me 1 second. No, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, you can share the screen.
It's going to work, yeah?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, bear with me. One of the let's see if we can get the other one. Yeah, I'm hoping this is going to work. Okay, no, don't worry. I'll scrap that for now. There we go.
Yeah, but I agree with what Tom was saying. For example, when I was working in China, I worked with different kinds of athletes, so different backgrounds. I worked in football in the Chinese Super League, and I worked, for example, with Olympic athletes and throwers. And yeah, it's going to work, Tom.
I'm hoping so. Just bear with me 1 moment. I'm just hoping to try and get some videos just to show a kind of range of
stuff. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. So basically, trying to say remove the technical element because of those kind of issues that we have. We try and generate greater load. So you can see here some of the different ways that we use. We've got a supine leg press on the left there, where we can put big weight on there and push through without that kind of technical element of squatting or being in the racks. The belt squat here, so obviously not loading through the spine. We're just dropping it around their waist, and they're getting their work done there. Again, loading it up. You've got the Jones press, the Jones machine here, and obviously the hip extension there. Yeah.
Tom, sometimes one of the main reasons that they use to not use this kind of work is not having a facility like yours.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
And I think you can explain very well that this kind of work doesn't need all of this equipment, especially for players that are not really well developed, that are in the very
what they're doing. Yeah. I totally agree. And I should have said that. I think, like I say, we're lucky to have what we have, but it's not always been that way. We began with just one leg press, and we were getting everybody to work through that. And like I say, as different players have come in, we've tried to complement what their backgrounds and histories have been, and brought in these different things. But I totally agree. I think in terms of the opportunities that people have at different clubs may not be the same, and any kind of strength stimulus that you can get into them, where I talk about the generating big kind of overloads, and we go kind of bang for your buck with a lot of the stuff that we do. But even just getting any kind of sensible and strength stimulus that's going to complement what they're doing out on the pitch is going to be beneficial, as long as it's done safely and at the right time in the week leading into games.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a question here from one of our spectators, and I think it has a lot to do with some myth that we have in football, and especially with strength and conditioning work. He's asking if strength training can make the player slower. Luis, what can you tell?
I think that, like we said in the beginning, strength underpins speed and power. So if athletes are stronger, they have the right engine to become faster and to jump higher and to be more powerful. Of course, this depends on the type of training they do. So when we talk about hypertrophy training, when we talk about bodybuilding methods, of course that kind of training is not going to make someone faster, because the goal of that kind of intervention is not to put athletes faster, is to make them bigger. We are talking about bodybuilders, right? But when we talk about athletes, the goal of strength is to make them, apart from more resilient and more robust against injury, is to make them faster and stronger. Of course, we are not going to make the slowest player on earth the fastest, like Usain Bolt. That's impossible, because it's also dependent on other kinds of aspects as genetics, which is important, of course. But for example, we have enormous research that shows us, for example, that the stronger the athletes are, the fastest they are. For example, the faster they are in the 10-meter sprint, which is very important acceleration in football. And for example, this paper was done in Norway with Rosenborg athletes, with Rosenborg FC players. And here we can see in these graphs that 94% of the times in this club, the athletes were stronger, for example, in the back squat, or it means in their legs. If they are stronger, they run faster. They cover the same distance in less time. We can also see that they jump more. So I think, as you said, is a myth, probably because the work that is traditionally done in football in terms of strength training is more the bodybuilding style. But when work is directed towards power improvement, speed improvement, when the players are stronger, indeed, they will not become slower, that's for sure.
Tom?
Yeah, I think like the question says, it's a bit of a myth. But I can see why people or coaches may view it like that at times. If training in the gym, whether it's strength or power or anything, what they're doing in the gym, if that affects how they are when they go outside. So if they're stiff or fatigued and sore, they then go outside and train, and they're obviously not moving as well as they should be, or they're slower because they're like I say, recovering from a strength session, or they've done the strength before the session, things like that. Then it can turn into a bit of an adverse effect on what they're doing outside. So as long as it's periodized well in the week and it's done at the right time, then no, it shouldn't.
It's an acute effect, not chronic effect.
Exactly. Yeah, it should be the other way around. So yeah, like Lewis.
As we said before, it needs to be integrated in the whole system, right? So if we smash the guys in the gym and after they cannot play football, it's wrong, because they are football players, right? So we need to integrate everything, and this is why, in my opinion, the communication with the coaching staff is so important in order to maximize the results.
Yeah,
we are. Maybe I think Tom touched a question that a topic that we're going to talk about, that was the capacity of the clubs to do individual work with athletes, because football squads are large. They have like 25, 30 players, and gym, even in Leicester, there is a big gym, but not all the teams have that facilities. So is it possible to do this kind of work individually and in your teams and with your experience? We know that in Leicester, Tom said that you worked with small groups, but I think that in most clubs, it's like a group session.
Sure.
What's the advantage and disadvantages of this? And I think this is linked with another question that we were talking about. That's now in media, we can see that a lot of athletes have personal trainers. And I think one of the main reasons is that they feel that in the club, they don't have the right amount of attention from coaches and from the staff, because not all the clubs have big staff also. And they think they need a special work for him. How can you see these two kinds of realities, the work on the club and outside the club, with the facilities and the possibility of doing like this individual work?
Yeah, I think what you touched on first there, Mario, in terms of the group versus individual work, I mean, ideally, we'd have as much time as possible with every player that we can to ensure that they understand what they're doing, how it's benefiting them, so on and so forth, like we've already discussed. But like you say, at times that's difficult, and you have to go with, maximizing the opportunity that you have. So if the manager at your club says, I want them to do one big group session once a week or twice a week, then that's what you have to go with. I think that's obviously depicted by who the manager is and their kind of approach and philosophy. So I think, you ultimately, you're kind of, you're controlled by that, and you've got to do the best with what you can in that situation. Group sessions can be really good in terms of making sure that everybody has had a stimulus or had some exposure to specific training. But equally, and obviously players don't then go missing and go under the radar with not coming in. Like I say, what we try and do is we have a kind of main strength and power coach, and then a couple of sports scientists, some interns and physios, and we all go in and we all try and help out with those gym sessions. So we might try and say, okay, I'll take these 2 or 3 players and go with their session. They're doing the same kind of exercises and schemes. So I'll go with them. Okay, you take them, and we work around different things. So at times in the gym, we can have, 15 players in there at once, but we try and break off into little groups as much as we can. Now, I know that that's not possible everywhere. Some clubs may only have one member of staff able to work with a whole group at once, and it's just doing the best that you can within that scenario. Your second point or question that you mentioned in terms of personal trainers, I think, like you say, it's something that's obviously become a little bit more common recently, over sort of most recent years. We've not really had any issues or had any examples like that, but I think the main thing that I would say is that if that kind of situation was to occur, that it would be a case of making sure that there was kind of no conflict of interest. So that communication that Lewis has already spoken about is crucial, the most crucial thing. If you can reach out to the personal trainer and make sure that they're not doing anything that's going to negatively influence what they're doing within the club, taking them out and doing 20, 100-meter sprints with them on an evening when they've got training the next day is obviously not going to be beneficial. The same if they're going to take them in the gym and they're going to do a big hypertrophy session, which isn't part of the plan at the moment within the squad regime. So it's a case of communicating with them, making sure that everyone's on the same page, even though a player may be saying, I'm not getting the kind of attention that I need in the gym. We're restricted, so on and so forth. Well, you can speak with the personal trainer and maybe you can turn it into a beneficial situation and get them to do certain things which you've maybe not been able to do when you have a big group session. But making sure that everyone's on the same page, there's no conflict of interest on the player, his performance, and his well-being in any way is what I'd kind of say to kind of mitigate all those issues. Yeah.
Luis?
So answering to the first question, I think the group training is dependent in a lot of factors. First, the facilities we have, as Tom said, what the coaches want, and also how large is the staff that we have to work with the athletes. And the main aspect, in my opinion, is the athlete experience in terms of, for example, weight room experience doing strength and power training. So if we have, not every club has, like Leicester has, not every club has a strength and power coach just to be in charge of strength and power training and adaptations. So in average, the clubs don't have a large staff in terms of strength conditioning of sports science. So this already makes the task of a very large group training together. This makes the task hard. The facilities, most clubs, as you said, they don't have a weight room like Leicester has. Probably we have smaller gyms, less equipment, and the athlete's background. Most or a big number of professional football players, they don't have history of strength and power training during their academy years, or even when they are senior athletes. So this forces us to try to reduce the number of athletes per coach as much as possible. So if we talk about one strength conditioning coach having a session with 25 athletes in a team, this will make the task very difficult because the athletes are not very proficient, and at the same time we cannot have control over everything. And this reinforces something that Tom also said, there is try to remove as much as possible the technical elements of the lifts. So if we try to do something basic, very easy that it's hard to do wrong, it's easier for us to coach as well, and we don't need as much people as we would need if we try to do something more advanced. So this is try to play a little bit with the athlete's experience, what we have in the club available. But I truly believe that within a group it's possible still, even when you train in a group, it's possible to individualize things. So the load is individualized. So it doesn't mean that by having 10 athletes training at the same time, it doesn't mean that all the athletes are doing the same thing. And I think that even over there, Tom, in the club, you can have 5 or 6 athletes training together, but probably you have 1 or 2 that are doing different things, right?
Yeah, no, doing totally different things. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, totally agree with that. Totally.
So this is more a question of organization and to educate athletes, because probably we can. And from my experience, athletes, sometimes when they see another athlete doing something different from them that in their view is more fancy or more advanced, they want to do the same. So it's very important to educate them why they should not do that in this particular moment. And probably after some time, they can already do it. So I truly believe that within a group it's possible to individualize. We just need to have the right context. Answering to the second question, before I went to China to work in football, I was working in the private setting with not only football athletes outside the club, but also from other sports, volleyball and basketball, handball, and I have different experience. I have, for example, athletes from clubs who don't have any communication with the people who work outside from the club. It's almost forbidden, right? So there is like athletes within the club, they cannot train outside. And there are other clubs who are interested, so they know it's impossible to confine athletes within the club because in professional sports, athletes are always moving, so it's normal for them to have certain preferences in terms of the people they work with and the kind of work they do. So there are some clubs who try to establish this communication. And as Tom said, it's very important because, for example, in the perspective that I was working, if I'm working outside the club, and if I add load, because the adaptations we get is when we load the athletes, right? So if I add load, even if it's not too much, but if the athlete is doing something in the club that, for example, in that particular day or in the next day, they are going to add some more, probably we are trying to add value, but we can probably earn more. So sometimes more is not better. And this is why communication is so important, because we need to be everybody in the same page. So yeah, that's communication as always.
And Tom,
Yep.
how would you integrate these gym sessions with field or tactical training and attending with different demands? Because we can have like one game a week or 2 games a week. How can we put all together this kind of strength and conditioning work with the technical and tactical work?
Yeah, I think between, as we mentioned it maybe 2 or 3 times about, doing it at the right time in the week and making sure it's periodized at the right time, complementing what they're doing outside. And for us, we've always kind of worked in a specific way. I think if I pull this up, it should work. Bear with me. This here is the way that we've worked at Leicester for some time. So if you're talking about kind of general periodization or tactical periodization models, and you look at this in terms of a match day on the left, working away to the match day the following Saturday or Sunday. This is a kind of typical model of a training week. But the way that we kind of changed things and the way that we looked to work was like this. So we actually had a rest day on the match day -3. And because of that, or the reason we did that was because we pushed the intensity on the match day +3 and we pushed the intensity on the match day -2, but in different ways. So on the pitch, we were doing small games on the match day +3 and bigger games and tactical element on the match day -2. But the way that the kind of strength and power fitted in there was the strength would be early on in the week before the day off, so they can then lead into the game with with the smallest amount of soreness as possible, especially with the day off afterwards, to try and push them for that adaptation, and then going for the power before they go into their bigger game, bigger areas, bigger size pitches on the match day -2. And that's the kind of, like I said, that's the kind of the way that we've worked for the past 5 or 6 years, especially. But now with the new manager, with Claude, he likes to work during the week slightly differently. So he, instead of having a day off in the middle of the week, we will do our bigger day on that day, on the match day -3. So at the moment, we're in a little bit of a transition, and we've decided that what's working best for us at the moment when we have a game Saturday to Saturday is we'll still try and get our strength done earlier on in the week, trying to make sure that it's tying in with the work that's going on outside, with the small pitches, the lots of accelerations, decelerations, change the direction, and then push for the kind of power element in the gym in the latter part of the week. We'll either do that at the moment on a -2 or a -1, depending on who the players are and how much it is they're doing. And we're finding some good stuff. I think it's a bit of a, like I say, we're trying to find our feet a little bit with it at the moment because we've worked in a specific way for so long. And so far, touch wood, so good. We're doing okay with it. In terms of what you said about the 2 game weeks, obviously poses a difficult scenario for us to try and fit those strength exposures and power exposures in during the week. Obviously recovery becomes the most essential part of what you're doing in between those games. And we're coming into a period now which is very, very highly congested. We have, I think, 9 games in 14 days or something like that that's coming up. So it's difficult, and obviously recovery becomes the main thing, and making sure that the substitutes are up to speed with everything and they're ready to go should they be called upon. So in terms of your strength and power, it's a case of trying to get it in where possible, making sure that the subs the non-starters that aren't playing, they're getting those exposures in leading into that spell as well, so they're not lacking, and making sure that they're programmed in during these kind of busy spells. So it's a difficult one. I think it kind of falls to the kind of back burner, the strength and power focus. But as long as they're getting out on the pitch, they're getting their recovery afterwards, and then they're ready to go again for the next game, that's all we can really do.
Perfect. Luis?
Yeah, in China, the way, so while I was working in football in China, over there the league was normally Sunday to Sunday or Saturday to Saturday. So we had a lot of days in between. The model that the head coach in the time wanted adapted was to have, for example, a day off after the match. And since the kind of players I was working with, what they lacked was strength. So they were not strong enough. They needed to become stronger in other, like we said before, strength and the pins, speed and power. So we wanted stronger athletes to become more resilient, but also to improve their power output, their performance. And the way we tried to separate things was the players who were not competing quite often, so the reserves. These athletes, they could have more exposure to maximal strength sessions. So we tried to put 2 sessions within a week. And for the starting 11 or the players who are utilizing the match, we try to put 1 strength session in the week, if possible. So in this model, the coach decided we didn't have so Tom showed in Leicester, they worked with a day off in the middle of the week in the +3, right, Tom? I think.
Yeah, -3.
-3. So we didn't have that. We'd only had 1 day off in the day after the match. The +2 for the players who played was more like a recovery. We can see here, for example, this is the +2. They did some recovery, and the athletes who were not, who didn't play, they could have exposure to high loads, and this was also equated within their technical training. In the +3, when the athletes already feel more fresh, we try to introduce some load in terms of the weight room. And I didn't have the freedom to work, for example, so the ideal was to have, for example, a maximal strength exposure and to have a day off or don't do anything in terms of strength and power in the next day. But in this particular case, the coach didn't want exposure to... It was power training, but he didn't want too much exposure to strength and conditioning, like 2 days before the match. Also because of the culture in China, the athletes, the football players are not used to do any physical training. So it was safer for us to do far away from the game. So we tried to do in the -3 some power-based, fast stuff, plyometrics, everything. And after to have this 2-day gap between the last weight room exposure until the match. But the most important is we try to do the high loads in the gym in the same day that the high loads are also on the pitch. because it means that in the following days, the player will have time to recover until the match and to have a better recovery.
And what both of you think about the importance of this kind of work in the off season? Because there the athletes has time and the professional players have the resources to dedicate some time to that kind of training and to go and see to work on their weakness points. Do you think it's they should invest their time in the off season? Or Luis, what do you think?
So during the season, especially in clubs that have tight schedule, during the season is almost maintenance. Is almost the main focus is recovery during all year round. So normally I say that the only 2 periods that we have within a professional athlete career to develop them physically is when they are injured or when they are on vacations or in the off-season period. So normally in Europe, the off-season is about 1 month and something. So it's important for the athletes to have some time off, of course, because we have athletes who do, for example, 16 matches in a season. So it's important for them to rest. But it cannot be in a professional athlete full rest, because then, for example, there is research who correlates the lack, for example, the absence in preseason, not in the off season, but it correlates with injuries. So athletes who perform less training sessions during preseason, they have greater risk of injury. The same happens in off season. If we stay 6 weeks without training, and after we go into that mentality of preseason that it's hard, stronger, and after injuries are going to occur, and I believe that a lot of injuries that occur during the preseason is because the athletes simply stop their exposure to training during 1 month. And this is something that it should not happen in professional sports. And it's very important this period to improve their weaknesses, because during the season will be very hard to try to find some time where they don't have technical and tactical training, where we have time to truly push them in terms of their physical qualities. Because as Tom said, if during the week, during the season, even if we have 7 days between matches, the head coach still wants the athlete to be fresh, in a fresh state, to be on the pitch. So we can add load, but not too much, otherwise we'll have problems. So the off season is the only time in the season they don't have football training, basically within the pitch. So it's a perfect timing for them to improve, absolutely, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Do you have any? Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, I think to some extent it can be. You can see it as a kind of window of opportunity where they're not going to be training and their training load is not going to be that high, and they are going to be doing certain things, but it's going to be a good opportunity to maybe, if they have weaknesses or deficiencies that need to be addressed, it's a great opportunity for that. I totally agree with you there, Lewis. I think to an extent, it's good for them to go away and mentally and physically kind of restore and recover, ready to go for what's going to be a tough kind of pre-season period. One of the things that we've done over the past couple of seasons is we've kind of gone to them with their off-season, or we try not to call it the off-season because that makes it sound like they're just off and they're not going to do any training. We call it the closed season, which means that, there's no games, but there's still stuff that's going to be going on. So we use a kind of online platform. It's called Team Performance Exchange. And we basically update as they go through each week. During their spell, we update what sessions they should be doing. But we've started integrating some video-based work in there as well. So when they're in the gym, more often than not, they'll be in a nice hotel gym in Barbados or Dubai or wherever it is they go, but they'll have their phone with them there. So if we can go to them with these sessions and say, right, if you're going to go in the gym, we want you, this player A, we want you to do this session, and we roll the whole session out on a video for them with our using somebody as a model, as an example. We show them exactly what they do. We have the rest times, we have the work times, we have the exact exercises, the exact reps, the exact loads. So they're literally just copying what's going on there, which is, it took a lot of time for us to put together, but having used that for the first time this close season, we actually got some good results with some of the guys, and we addressed some of the needs that they had, or the deficiencies or weaknesses that we wanted to work on. And like Lewis said, it's a great opportunity to do that kind of thing. So we found it really useful, and like I said, it's taken a bit of time, and fortunately we had the kind of resources to do it. More difficult if we talked about without staffing or structures in place to do that kind of thing. We know you might struggle, but that's one of our methods. We spoke with the guys beforehand, before the close season, before they went away, and said, this is what we're going to do. And then we rolled it out, and fortunately we had a good kind of uptake, and we could see when they viewed it and stuff like that, and whether they went through the whole video, things like that. So that was good. That was a good way of doing it.
Yeah, this is where education counts the most, right? If we educate the importance, and to build that culture of training, even when they are outside the club. Of course, it's impossible to control everything, but that's not the goal. But if they have the players understand the importance of, okay, it's important for you to rest, but still keep some exposure to training, and you need to work on this because during the preseason and in-season is not going to be easy to do it. Yeah. I think the education is crucial in to build by it.
Totally. Most important thing, yeah.
This was a great talk. I want to thank Louis and Tom for this share of knowledge and experience. I think everyone else enjoyed this conversation and this share of knowledge. And thank you for all for watching and participating in this session. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.